Ready. Hi, Rob, I'm Cassie. Really great to meet you, and thank you very much for talking with us today.
Sure.
This is a really exciting moment for us. So I wanted to find out about Starfinder and about you too as well. So could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure. I'm Rob McCreary. I'm the Creative Director for Starfinder and one of the design leads for the Starfinder core rulebook. I've been with Paizo for about 9 years now, almost. I started working on Pathfinder and then now I'm going on Starfinder.
Excellent, very cool. So for those of us who don't fully understand like the game creation process, can you explain the role of a creative director?
Sure, it's kind of, I'm kind of overall in charge of the overall Starfinder brand. So it's kind of, it's both talking about what kind of stories, what kind of books do we want to do. We've got a whole team, but we all kind of talk, but I kind of sort of guide our discussions or think about these are the kind of things you want to do. I'm also involved in some of like the strategy meetings and also approvals for like licensed products and that kind of stuff to make sure that it matches what we want for the brand and the stories that we want to tell with our game.
Very cool. So out of all of that, which part is your most favorite and which part is your least favorite?
Definitely working on the game itself when I have time to do that is my most favorite because that's when we're actually creating the game and thinking up the new stuff we're going to do. Least favorite, I guess, is sometimes some of the business side of it can be a little dry and everything. It's important, but
it's an important part of the process.
Right.
But yeah,
it's not as fun as the gaming part of it. So.
Excellent. Very cool. Where shall we begin? Like I said, I've very poorly written, all over the place notes. So for role players who haven't had the opportunity to play Starfinder yet, what are some of the aspects that you find most exciting about the game?
The thing that I like the best is that it's a science fantasy role-playing game. So, I grew up playing all the fantasy games, Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, but I always read a lot more science fiction. So it's kind of like two passions of mine.
Yeah.
So being able to blend these two together has been really fun. Just in terms of, it's like, we could say it's sort of a game of laser ninjas and space wizards because you can do, if you want a holy plasma cannon to carry around, you can do all that kind of stuff. So anything from fantasy, anything from science fiction, it all gets thrown in together.
We actually just heard from Chris about the Grenade of Wonder.
Right.
So it's like having that kind of like mashup is like just so cool.
Exactly. We love that.
Hearing it really. It's been on our list, and now I feel like talking to you, it's moving up that list, and we're gonna like knock stuff out of the way and just put that Starfinder much closer to the top. We have one of the things I was actually curious about. So why did Paizo kind of decide to move away from the traditional like open gaming license and develop that new rule set that's going on with Starfinder?
Well, Starfinder is still under the open gaming license.
Okay.
The main thing is we have a lot of people that like science fiction on our staff and everything, and the setting of Starfinder is based on something we'd originally done for Pathfinder. We did a book called Distant Worlds, which described the solar system around Golarion, which is where Pathfinder is set. And so we already had this solar system, and we were like, well, what happened if we go into like a sort of possible future of Pathfinder? What would happen there? And we already had that, and so we were like, let's play around with it and see what we can do. And that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah. Somebody's trying to get out the doors that they're not supposed to get out of. I guess we're gonna have
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that, people. We can fix it in post.
All right.
So, okay. Now, what about the character creation process? Because that's definitely different from what we've been doing with Pathfinder. What was the reason behind moving towards that kind of concept for character creation?
We wanted to make it a little bit more approachable and kind of easier to get into. It's not super different from it. I mean, if you've created characters in Pathfinder, it's some of the point buy is a little different, allows more customization, and but isn't quite as arcane for the calculations to do it that way. Of course, you can still roll dice to get your ability scores if you want to do it old school. That was something I fought really hard to keep in there because I always like rolling dice for my scores because that's what I grew up doing originally.
Definitely. So one of the things that I really like, because there's 3 different options. There's like the ancestry, is that right? Or is that for 2.0? Now I can't remember.
Yeah, if we had come up with ancestry, we totally would have
right.
used
I was
that
like,
for,
I was like, wait a minute.
we still
I'm
call them
mixing
races,
everything
or
up.
we sometimes use species as well.
Okay.
So races, classes, and themes.
Themes, that's
is
the one
third
that
thing.
was the one that I was really interested
Right.
in.
That's something that we came up with. It can be both a background and also sort of a destiny sort of thing. When we were talking about what kind of character classes we wanted to do, we were looking at certain iconic character types from science fiction, and it's like, well, there's the pilot, the ace pilot, but is that something that's really a class, or is that something that anybody can be? And so that's why we took that into the themes. So you can play someone who's like a scientist in an alien race, but by taking the ace pilot theme, that gives you an extra bit of customization for your character that anybody can be. It doesn't define you, but it's just an aspect of your character.
Excellent. So which theme is your favorite personally?
I really like the ace pilot theme just because, I grew up watching Star Wars and everything, and Luke Skywalker was that. We've produced a few other themes in some of our other books as well, and a current character that I'm playing is a xenoarchaeologist theme, so he's really interested in exploring new alien cultures and meeting new aliens.
That's fantastic.
So that one's another favorite of mine.
Very cool. So, okay, I haven't covered everything. I don't know. So, how about the artistic influences that really inspired Starfinder? So there's that old the science fiction, the classic kind of Star Wars, or what is that one with the Danger Will Robinson?
Lost in Space.
That's
Yeah.
Did you draw from those older kind of sci-fi stuff to inspire you with Starfinder?
We certainly did. I mean, we took inspiration from all sorts of places, both for our art and for the concepts. I mean, there's video games, there's novels, there's movies, there's the old pulp stories, all that kind of stuff. And the great thing is with a science fantasy game that's out in space, there's a whole galaxy to play with. So any kind of concept for a world, if you like that sort of old pulp stuff like John Carter of Mars, you can easily do that. If you like a lot more futuristic, you can do that as well. I mean, you could the sort of really clean futuristic aesthetic of Star Trek has a place in there, just like the sort of beat up aesthetic of Star Wars is also just as easily found in there.
So, what was the inspiration for the gap? Where there's just this. Nobody knows what happened in the past 300 years.
Right.
Why did you choose to go that route?
There's 2 real reasons for it. In Pathfinder, we have a couple of big mysteries for the campaign that kind of ground it and kind of give a touchstone or a mystery that everyone can kind of explore, both GMs and us as designers. And we wanted to have some big mystery like that too, that kind of gives something that nobody knows about, but that you can use as an adventure book. That's one reason, sort of the in-world reason. There's also sort of the meta reason, because this is a possible future of Pathfinder. We wanted to separate it from what happens in Pathfinder, because we don't want something in one game to undo what's been said in another game. So from a meta reason, it's kind of, if there's this period of time that nobody knows what happened, really anything could have happened in that time.
That makes a lot of sense, and keeping the ambiguity, like you said, is going to really help game masters come up with some really creative things where they don't necessarily have to expect you guys to provide that. They can make it up themselves, which I think any great game master would latch on to real quick.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered a lot of the questions that I have. We spoke with Mark. I can't remember his last name, but it begins with an S.
Seifler.
That's the one.
Yeah, we have 2 Marks. So
yeah, I was like, we spoke to him earlier, and he mentioned something about you really liking dwarves. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I like dwarves. Yeah.
Yeah. Why are they your favorite race?
I don't know. I've just always it probably comes from reading Tolkien and then the Dragonlance books and that sort of stuff. It's interesting because when we were first designing Starfinder, it is this sort of future of Pathfinder, and it's well, do we want all new races or do we want the old races? And me and both my Owen Stevens, who's our rules lead on Starfinder, he also is a big fan of dwarves, and we were like, we want dwarves in there. In the end, we did we have humans and then 6 new alien races. But then there is a section in the Starfinder core rulebook called Pathfinder Legacy where we have the rules for all of the traditional fantasy races because they are still around. So elves, dwarves, and halflings you can still play. They're just not the core races of the setting. But now, in space, dwarves can go out mining in asteroids and stuff and flying around in big... In Pathfinder, the dwarves have these sky citadels, which is where they first burrowed up from underground. Now they have star citadels, which are basically giant asteroid ships that fly around.
That's fantastic.
So it's a cool kind of thing. It's like, what happens to dwarves in space is a fun question.
Very cool. Did you also ask that same question for the other classic races?
We were kind of looking at all of them as a whole, and we decided let's put all of them sort of to the side. They're just not in the forefront anymore because we wanted to kind of show off some of the new science fiction aliens that we can play around with here.
So speaking of that, which one of the alien races now is your particular favorite?
Well, we have a ton because one of the things that we want to give that sort of Star Wars cantina feel to the world.
Yes.
So a lot of our monsters that you can fight also have rules to play them as playable races.
That's awesome.
But one that I particularly like that I'm playing right now is called a Bantrid, and they're these weird little aliens. They were recently discovered. They don't have feet, they have a little ball that they sit on and roll around, and they're constantly in motion. They're maybe a little bit hyperactive, so it's kind of fun to role play in a wheeled chair at the table, and I'm just constantly moving around. And they just look really weird. They look like just like a little cone on top of a ball, and they don't look human at all, so it's a lot of fun.
So do they communicate in the same way that, like, say, a human would? Like, are they able to vocalize, or do you have to, like, mime, like...
No, they have speech. They don't have a sense of smell, so
Okay.
anything that's smell related they don't know about, but they can still talk like everybody else.
Okay.
They've got appendages that work enough like hands that they can wield a weapon and everything, and they just look cool, and they roll around a lot, so it's fun.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Well, gosh, did you have any other questions, John, that you thought of?
So you mentioned Tolkien. I'm a huge Tolkien fan. What is your favorite quote or theme from the books that you think people in the real world should keep in mind in their day-to-day lives?
Wow, that is a deep question. I'm gonna have to.
He does that a lot.
I'm gonna have to think back to. I kind of like. I read The Hobbit before I read anything. I've always loved The Hobbit more than even like The Lord of the Rings and everything.
That's
just
my favorite one too.
just this sort of like sense of wonder that Bilbo has. He's like afraid to go, but he goes out and sees this wider world and meets these new people and everything, and then he still wants to come back home, but he was changed by that experience. And I think I've always enjoyed traveling too, and I think that's a really good thing, is going out there, seeing what's out there, and even if you come back home, you've still had that experience and have been exposed to a wider world around you. And I think that's a great thing to do.
Well, gosh, I really, once again, appreciate your time, and thank you so much for your insight, and we definitely look forward to seeing more of Starfinder and how it develops over the next 10 years.
Great.
So,
Well, thanks for talking with me.
you're very welcome. Thank you again.
Sure, thanks.